Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marku Kangaspuro. I'm a director of the Alexandrovskого Institute for Russian and Eastern European Studies at the University of Helsinki. I want to thank you, the organizers of the conference, the chair, that I have been invited to give presentation with distinguished colleagues and distinguished researchers, professors. Swedish expansion before the Niштadta peace treaty during the 30 years wars was amazing, and it formed and created a new reality in the Northern Europe and around the Baltic Sea area. You see from this map gains which Sweden have got new areas from contemporary Russian side and at that time from the Baltic state area. Sweden was at that time, and it became at that time a great power of whole Europe. The Great Northern War created a new situation, new power balance. It was the war between, at that time, great powers of the Europe. We see that the coalitions were also complicated, and that we know that they changed it, but the main setting was, and the main logic was, France supported Sweden against increasing Russian leverage on Europe and also in South, and England and Netherlands, they supported all parties depending on their own interest. It was the question of the commerce, sea areas, Baltic Sea, Atlantic, and so forth, Mediterranean as well, were on their sphere of interest. And part of German electorates, German kingdoms, they were allied with Russia as well. And so the big picture was that it was the competition and the war of all European main actors. The result was, as we know, it was that Sweden lost Ingria and Nain fortress in 1702, already in the beginning of the war, and this was actually probably one of the most important events because it opened the door for Russia to establish St. Petersburg in 1703. After that, St. Petersburg has been, of course, one of the key actors. It created a new geopolitical situation in the Baltic Sea area, which we can say that it's prevailing still to this day. As I mentioned, the role of France was important, and it had its own interests. It has had always its own interests. And of course, we can't forget the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire's role of the southern direction and the Eurasian area, it has been always important, and it has been always connected also to the development of the Baltic Sea. We can briefly conclude that the Baltic Sea development, security, commercial and political development has never been isolated. The Ништадта Treaty 1721 ended big war, and it sealed that Russia became the Baltic Sea power. European big power competition continued between France and England, and it was reflected on the Baltic Sea area, with competition with Russia and made alliances with Russia. It made the political development on the Baltic Sea area pretty much puzzles. There were not any dominant big power. Sweden lost its big power status and made several revanchist attempts to get seceded areas back. Sweden still didn't have any more independent role on the area, but it's played as a role of pawn for big powers. Finland was a battlefield of Sweden and Russia during the whole 18th century, and the Napoleonic Wars, they led finally to agreement also between Napoleon and Alexander I, that the result was that Russia annexed Finland. Finland became transformed from the Swedish eastern province or part as a Grand Duchy of Finland in 1809. After that, Russia was full Baltic Sea empire. After the break of the Russian Empire, at the end of the World War I, result was the independence of the Baltic states, Finland, Poland, and so forth. And it created geopolitically more or less unsettled period between World War I and World War II. After the Second World War, geopolitical situation resembled the situation after Ништадта Treaty. The Baltic states were again part of Russia or the Soviet Union. Sweden was not allied with the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, neither was Finland, but Finland was understood to be a part and it was connected to part of the Russian military sphere of interest with special agreement, and Sweden protected its independence to declining agreement-based alliances, but although it cooperated and had quite deep cooperation and connections, also military connections, and as we know nowadays, secret treaties with leading North Atlantic Treaty Organization state, the United States. In any case, the military balance, security balance on the Baltic Sea area was based on that, on the more or less power balance between the Soviet Union and the NATO, and the fact that Finland and Sweden were not military allied, and their interest, of course, was to keep the situation balanced. There were a couple of hot spots which both of the parties, the Soviet Union and NATO, were focusing. One was the northern strategic area of the Barents Sea and northern, and then around Denmark, between Denmark and Sweden, these Bering Straits, which are gate from the Baltic Sea to Atlantic. Between Russia and the West, NATO and the European communities, there was a quite wide non-allied area of countries previously connected as a part of the Soviet sphere of influence or part of the Soviet Union. And that is the time what quite many diplomats and politicians has characterized as an unrealized possibility to create a new type or new direction for the European security, which is not based on the military alliances and military strength. Finland and Sweden were on their own position as a military neutral, but beyond them and besides them, there were, like you see from the map, there were former Soviet alliances and former Soviet republics which were not also allied with anyone, and they started to find their own direction and make conclusions of the situation. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, we see that its military presence decreased dramatically during the whole 1990s and early 2000s. This map, these red crossed area places, they are places where abandoned Russian military bases. The moment we have again after the mid-2000, late 2000, we started a new development for many reasons around also the Baltic Sea area, and Russia has established its Alakurti new military base supporting the Northern Fleet, actually the part of the Northern Fleet, and it has strengthened Kaliningrad military base. And of course, this has been the part of modernization of army. New feature on the Baltic Sea area has been also that countries previously part of the Soviet sphere of interest or the Soviet Union, they have joined to the NATO, and again the leverage of the European big powers and also the United States has returned to the Baltic Sea area. Economic importance of the Baltic Sea area is great, like it has been always. It was one reason of the Great Northern War and Swedish role there and Russia's entrance to the Baltic Sea. And at the moment there is the Nord Stream first and second, and the whole trade. This big power politics around the Baltic Sea area, nowadays it is characterized by the one-way politics of the United States, which they themselves call containment policy. Starting in 2000, its idea is to contain the power of strengthening Russia and keep it out of the former sphere of the Soviet influence. This map could be shown by the generals on the staff of Moscow, but it is made by the one American think tank, and it shows that how they see the situation. The main equipment to contain Russia has been military and economic support of the United States to the new member state of the NATO. And of course, this map tells also very clearly how and why Belarus and Ukraine are military important for Russia, and this is clear, gives a clear picture also why the Baltic Sea is connected to the tensions occurring more distant areas out of the Baltic Sea area. Part of this policy is, of course, Finland's and Sweden cooperation with NATO, although they are not NATO members. According to their policy, the cooperation with the Western big powers and NATO without being a member is part of their balancing policy, power balancing policy to counter Russian growing power on the Baltic Sea area. And of course the tension, geopolitical tension and the security political tension, military political tensions on the Black Sea and from there to Mediterranean, which have been reflected to Baltic Sea area. Idea is more or less same what it was during the Great Northern War. So what we can say after 300 years of the Ништадта Treaty, we have new realities, new situation, but old challenges on the Baltic Sea area. Power balance between big powers is prevailing. The power balance to keep military tension low is the precondition of all positive future perspectives on the Baltic Sea area. The question is that how do we realize and are able to realize the full potential of economic, ecological and cultural development of the Baltic Sea area. And without decreasing military tension and growing military tension and political tensions, we are not able to do it. The key word, of course, is a cooperation, the trust based on shared rules and agreements, which everyone have to be followed. For small states like Finland, lower military tension cooperation gives wider field to move and operate than world which is ruled by military means and bigger powers and power politics. And for that reason, it's at least our, but I believe strongly that our common interest to keep the Baltic Sea as peaceful as possible. This is challenge this whole development of the Baltic Sea area and to solve our tensions and problems. This I'm optimistic can be solved in one day in the future. So thank you for listening to me and I wish you a great and good continuation and results of the conference.